Hello to everyone from Boston College in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And I greet you in that way because there are people, almost 1,000 of you, from around the world who are joining right now at this beginning point of our 12 weeks of retreat in Manresa. I'm delighted that you're taking time for retreat in the midst of a very interesting time for all of us around the world. I'm Father Casey Beaumire. I serve as Vice President and Secretary of Boston College, and I'm the Director of the Institute for Advanced Jesuit Studies. And on behalf of my colleagues, Matthew, Tyga, and Ginny, a very warm welcome to you. You're most welcome as we begin these important days of prayer. What I want to do today on this opening moment of our retreat is to say a few things about the spiritual exercises and then to say a few things about the preparations for our retreat and then to say something about the small group experience that I hope that you have as we go into our retreat together. So first, to begin with, why does a person make spiritual exercises? And I'm very aware that there are retreatants here who are well versed in the spiritual exercises. And I'm also aware that there are a number of people who are brand new to this experience. For all of us, it's good to remember that Saint Ignatius Loyola wrote the spiritual exercises when he was in a cave in Manresa. So that's why we have this name for our retreat, that in many ways we find ourselves in a kind of cave in our world because of the coronavirus and because of other unprecedented circumstances that each of us finds ourselves in at this moment. Spiritual exercises are made in order to help free us from any sort of disordered affection so that we can make good decisions in our lives. And when people ask me about spiritual exercise, I remind people to think about physical exercise. That physical exercise is always about strengthening the core, right? That when I'm exercising my body, I'm trying to exercise that core, which has an effect upon the entire physical body. Well, very much similar in spiritual exercise, that in Latin, the name for the heart is the core. Spiritual exercise is about strengthening the heart. And that we believe that when our interior is strong, when our interior is robust, that we can be very, very effective in the way that we live and move and have our being. So for us to begin 12 weeks of spiritual exercise would be akin to preparations for some sort of a road race or some sort of an opportunity at hand for our lives. Right now, you're listening to me and you're using your physical ears. And perhaps you're able to look at me on this YouTube video and you're seeing me with your physical eyes. And that is a reminder that we learn through our senses, that when I taste those ingredients, or when I feel that material, or when I look at that presentation, or when I listen to that music, I'm intaking knowledge through my senses. Well, spiritual exercise is also about preparations for strengthening the interior senses so that we have a robust and strong interior, because we believe that there are eyes of the heart. We believe that there are ears of the heart, that there are spiritual senses just as there are physical senses. For example, you might tell me something that's happened in your family's life that has had a huge impact upon you. And as you conclude sharing that experience with me, I might say to you, I see where you're coming from. I see what you mean. Well, I'm not seeing here because I wasn't with you in that past moment, but I'm seeing here because of the compassion and solidarity that comes from strong interior vision. You might tell me something very sad that happened to you. And when you finish sharing, I might say, I feel for you. I feel for your family. Well, I'm not feeling here because I wasn't with you and your family in that circumstance. But I'm feeling here because of the compassion and solidarity that comes from deep and thoughtful listening. The highest to which we can attain, the best of humanity, is when the physical senses and the spiritual senses are in communion with each other. That simultaneously I'm seeing here and I'm seeing here together. That's a beautiful, fully human moment. And we believe that when our spiritual senses are in sync with our physical senses, that is our pinnacle of the imitation of Christ. In many ways, I think about the spiritual senses as my giving permission for Jesus to see through me, for Jesus to listen through me, for Jesus to feel through me. There's no force, there's no coercion in the strengthening of the spiritual senses. But for us to be fully human, we want those senses to be robust and very, very alive. Because when they are, we delight in the fullness of the humanity that has been entrusted to us. When I talk about the spiritual senses to our students here at Boston College, I will remind them that in many ways the spiritual senses are the entree into the school of the heart. We're first and foremost a university, and many people come here to get a great education, right? That we have a marvelous school of education. We have a very effective school of nursing. There's an excellent pre-med program through our arts and sciences. This is a great business school. Many people come here for the academic, intellectual formation that comes from a great university. But the spiritual senses are expanded and deepened through the school of the heart. And there's no force, there's no coercion for people to enroll in that school. But we want to give people the opportunities to be able to experience how it is their spiritual senses can grow and expand through the gift of formation. Spiritual exercise, we believe, is the way that we make those interior senses become alive. So for us to take 12 weeks in the summer and to join in prayer and to really seek a deepening interior, this will make us more fully human. And it will make the presence of Jesus more palpable in the world through us. The Lord never forces himself into our lives. But for those of us who are believers, when we give permission for the Lord to work in us and through us for others, we believe that we're participating in that noble endeavor called on earth as it is in heaven. And that's the Great Commission. You and I get out of bed in the morning in order to participate each day in this noble cause, the upbuilding of on earth as it is in heaven. But I'll tell you, if you and I rely only on ourselves for this upbuilding, we're going to rust out. We'll burn out because we can't be fueled by our egos, by our self-interest. It's got to come from something deeper within us. And that's where the spiritual senses come to our assistance. So our hope for everyone who's on retreat is that what you discover is a more robust interior, and that you find that the Lord is inviting you to become more of an apostle, regardless of your age, regardless of your circumstance, regardless of your past. Every person, through the gift of retreat, can be made anew and can start with fresh eyes, renewed ears, a deeper sense of communion and solidarity. And I think that this makes such an experience worthy of our fidelity, worthy of our attention, worthy of our effort. So I'm delighted. I'm delighted that you're taking this time to begin such an important time as a retreat. Now, it goes without saying that this is not typical. I mean, right now, I'm at the Institute and I'm alone and I'm speaking to you through my computer. And we're all going to spend 12 weeks in retreat. This is very, very unusual, right? That we have retreat houses around the world where people go and they make these kinds of exercises in the company of one another in person. But for many of us, because of the stay-at-home expectation, because of our own vulnerability in health, because of the people with whom we might live, we might not be able to take that kind of time or to go to that kind of place. So this is kind of an interesting experiment, right? That we take time online to be able to ponder, and that you have a resource, a book from the Institute of Jesuit Sources, to help you each day to engage in these kinds of exercises. So this will be an important time for all of us. And our goal is to develop a robust interior that will come to our assistance in moments of great success and moments of great challenge. If you have reviewed your book, you'll understand that every day there are meditations for you to ponder, and that you do so in sacred silence. We're recommending for about 30 minutes a day for the next 12 weeks. That's your personal prayer time. And I don't know how you pray. I don't know what your experience of prayer is. But when I talk to people about prayer, I will define prayer very simply. That prayer is our relationship with God. It's the time, it's the experience that you and I share with God in a very unique and personal way. When people ask me, how am I to pray? That's a really important question. And there are many answers to that. The way that I hear that question sometimes, it's as if someone were asking me, how am I to be a friend? Well, how you engage in friendship and how friends spend time together, deepening that relationship, is utterly unique. Some people love to go to the game together. Others like to go out for a beer or for a coffee, or they like to take a stroll, or they simply like to sit in each other's company and engage in a great conversation. Whatever it is that you do in your personal relationship to grow close is likened to the way how we spend time in prayer, growing closer to God, to Jesus, to the Holy Spirit, to Mother Mary. When you take time to be in sacred silence and to engage in that kind of relational experience, you are, in that moment, being a person of prayer. And that's special. We Catholics, we have prayer in common. For example, going to the Mass, praying the Rosary together. These are prayers that are of our tradition, how the community gathers, how our tradition teaches. And in addition to that, every person is invited to a personal relationship with God. Now, remember, the goal of all prayer is to be with God. So when we engage in spiritual exercise, we're not trying to show how strong we are, or how much we can endure, or how it is that we can make this experience happen. These are 12 weeks that are very special for you and I to grow and deepen our relationship with God. And I think it's important that that be the primary motivation for why we find ourselves drawn to retreat. And if that's in your heart, then I believe that these will be very special, very sacred weeks for your prayer. That's my hope for you. If you spend time with the Spiritual Exercises, the book, which you can acquire through the Institute of Jesuit Sources, you will see that the beginning Ignatius provides in that text some annotations. And I want to say a few things about a couple of the annotations that I think are helpful for our effort during these 12 weeks in Manresa. There's an annotation, number 5, that invites us to enter into the spiritual exercises with magnanimity. That's a beautiful word. Magnanimity is big-heartedness. That we enter into these days of retreat full of hope and desire and anticipation, deep longing, all those attributes that would come with big-heartedness. That our intention is to grow. Our intention is to have a beautiful experience of prayer. And it will be an adventure, right? That you know from living that there are all sorts of peaks and valleys, highs and lows, consolations and desolations that each day brings to us. So that's going to be part of your experience of prayer. But magnanimity, that beautiful virtue of big-heartedness, will motivate and accompany you and me to be faithful to these days of retreat. There's another annotation, number 7, that reminds us to be gentle and kind in times of challenge, in times of difficulty. That in many ways, we must rest in a spirit of encouragement for one another, for ourselves, and that God is desiring that spirit of encouragement for us as well. And in annotation 13, kind of a cousin encouragement, Ignatius reminds us to be faithful, especially in times of discouragement, to stay steady and committed. Anytime we do something over a long period of time, inevitably we grow fatigued, or maybe we get bored, or maybe we start to doubt our original intention. That's why it's important for us to name that temptation now, so that come mid-July, for example, when we start to feel the long period of retreat, that we remember that we began this retreat with great hope and anticipation, and that we want to continue to draw from that, to continue to trust that. So to be faithful, to see our way through to the completion of our retreat come the 30th of August. And then finally, this is so important, annotation 15, in a nutshell. And again, I am paraphrasing all of these in ways that I've understood in my Jesuit formation. Annotation 15 reminds us that God is already at work. God is directly involved in the lives of every person, whether she or he acknowledges that or believes that or not my job. But I think that this is a very important insight that Ignatius is reminding us of. When we encounter people's experiences that are so difficult, or when we find ourselves in challenging moments, to trust somehow, in a mysterious way, God is there, God is present, God is at work. Even in moments where it feels like God is absent or God is not at work, to trust that somehow the Lord is here in our midst, in the midst of all things. So when we say in our spirituality that a desire is to find God in all things, it's to trust that somehow, in ways that are often inexplicable and not understood, God is present. Now again, my job isn't to try to convince you of that, and my job isn't to try to prove that. My job as a believer is to grow to trust that. And I will say, quite frankly, that I struggle with that sometimes too. In the fullness of my humanity, sometimes I wonder, God, are you there? God, do you care? Are you listening? That's just being honest. And maybe part of our retreat is to come to terms with the fidelity of God, even in moments of seeming absence and quiet. So, those annotations I mentioned simply out of a spirit of encouragement. Ignatius provides them for people who are going to be directing those who are making the retreat. But I think for all of us to hear those reflections and to take them to heart will help in our quest for magnanimity as we enter into the retreat. I want to say something now about the small group experience. And this is important. Remember, these little videos that we'll do from the Institute every other Sunday, and the small groups that accompany your experience on the other weeks. Those are just tiny, tiny pieces that accompany the primary experience of the retreat, which is your daily prayer. And I think to experience those in that kind of proportionality, right? That my small group experience is not to be the center point of the retreat. These videos certainly are not meant to be the center point of the retreat. The center point of your retreat is the time that you and God share together. And that's the joy of being on retreat. So when you enter into the small group, remember each group has a facilitator. Some of our retreatants are coming together as a group, and they have a facilitator maybe through their school or through their parish. Others who are on retreat have been randomly placed by the Institute into a small group for faith sharing. All of us will benefit from remembering that our facilitators are retreatants. Everyone is on retreat. The facilitator's main role is to help organize the group to make decisions about when they're going to meet in those alternate weeks and how they're going to meet through Zoom or through some other venue. And we have, through the Institute, provided some information in our frequently asked questions section on the website to help you prepare for those small group experiences. And I want to remind you that when you're in a small group, the goal isn't to try to figure out everything or to try to fix our problems or the problems of the sisters and brothers in Christ who are in our group. The primary experience is the sharing, the naming of grace, and to listen attentively to the hand of God at work in one another, and to be sources of encouragement where there is discouragement present. The small group, the videos, supplement the retreat. And they're important supplements because they provide us, I think, a sense of communion for how we experience that we're not on retreat by ourselves, we're with each other. In other words, I would say this: let those supplements be moments where you practice accepting more than expecting. That's a pretty good slogan. I should probably get that on a t-shirt, right? To be a person who accepts less than she or he expects. Very challenging for me, right? That oftentimes I might expect this group to speak at a deep level, or I might expect everyone to share at the same level. Well, remember, we're coming from all over the world. We're coming with all sorts of different levels of experience, and we're also coming with our own personal histories. So to reverence that and to be accepting of where people are and to accept them for who they are is a real act of kindness. So I want to make sure that we're being clear about what you can expect from the small group and to be gentle in what that experience is like. Again, we're not in charge of it, right? We, to our best ability, tried to assign people so that they were in close time zones and so that the number would be a good number to work with. But it really is a mystery. It's an act of trust on our part that people are entering in with a good spirit and with the goal of simple listening, simple sharing in ways that are proper for a group that will meet 6 times. And I do think that you will be consoled by the good example of the others who are on retreat. Some of us here at the Institute said, wouldn't it be marvelous if we could visit each of the groups and just have a sense of what the Spirit is doing? I mean, I think that would be a beautiful vision. But it's important for you and I to know that there are over 100 small groups that are meeting each time. And there'll be all sorts of highs and lows, consolations and desolations. To see that and to be trusting of that and to accept will make for a very good experience. When you are making the retreat, you'll discover in the book some spaces where you can write some reflections. I know for myself that I keep on retreats, especially, a little spiritual diary. And when I record my movements of the Spirit, I tend to find it helpful to reflect upon my thoughts, my feelings, and my desires. Very, very simple, right? I'm not a complex person, I don't think. But I find that it's helpful for me after I pray to reflect upon my thoughts, my feelings, and my desires. And when I write those things down, I write them to God. And I'm always listening for little seeds of grace being planted in my life. You see, grace, I think, is very gentle. Divine love is very gentle. It never forces itself upon us. But I believe that grace, that divine love, will start to sprout if we give permission for it to enter into our lives. And when we write the vision down, when we write what our experience of thoughts and feelings and desires are as the fruit of our prayer, we start to discover, I think, seeds of grace being planted within our hearts and minds. And that's material that I think is fair game and helpful for sharing in the small groups. And I think it's also important for us to name moments where we felt distracted, or where we felt discouraged, or when we felt that the bad spirit was trying to tempt us or mislead us. Just like in the physical world, when the bad spirit starts to manifest itself kind of like a shadow, the way to make that disappear is to put light upon it, right? That in my room, if there's a shadow, if I turn on the lamp, that shadow disappears. It's the same thing in the spiritual world, that when that shadow of darkness enters in, when we let the light of Christ into our lives, it overcomes that darkness. How to do that? Well, I think quite simply through spiritual conversation, through petition, asking the Lord to bring light into our lives. And this might sound silly, but I also think by standing up and moving, putting ourselves into a different venue would be very important. When you are praying, it's going to depend, or how your recording and how your experience is depends on where you pray, I think. Now, many of us don't have access to our churches or chapels. Some do. And if you have access to a holy space like that, maybe that could be a place that you go for your personal prayer. But maybe not every day, but maybe some days each week. For those of us who have to stay home, having a little space that's designated as a place for prayer, whether it's a comfortable chair or a part of a room where I have a crucifix or some sort of an icon or some sort of an image that's beautiful that represents God in my life. Others, depending on where they live, they might be finding themselves in the midst of a beautiful summer, and they might find it's beautiful to go outside and to sit in sacred silence and to meditate in that way. Whatever you choose, recognize that a prayerful place comes to your assistance too. So, writing the vision down, reverencing space, engaging in spiritual conversation, taking the time to pray will make for a beautiful retreat for you. So, those are my ponderings on the eve before we begin our retreat. And I want to assure you of my prayer for you, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of our other colleagues at the Institute. We've been working very hard to get your experience to this point, and now I think it's up to you. It's up to you to be open to the gift of God moving in your life. And I pray that be a very happy and beautiful experience. So as we conclude today, let's pray for each other, and let's remember that the Spirit is at work. And we ask that through the intercession of Saint Ignatius Loyola, each of us might find these spiritual exercises to be experiences of hope in the midst of dark times in our world, that we might find the light of Christ growing within us, inspiring us to continue to be effective, to be generous, to be persons of hope who help every day in the upbuilding of on earth as it is in heaven. So a good day from the Institute for Advanced Jesuit Studies here at Boston College. Prayers for you as you begin your retreat. And let's continue to pray for each other. We pray for our world and for its healing. Thanks, and please let us know if we can be of assistance. Goodbye.